The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, exactly 12 hours after I stumbled through our front door, reeking of cheap wine and Felix's cologne. My husband Eddie sat at our kitchen table, his coffee growing cold as he watched me read the legal documents with shaking hands. Our 7-year-old daughter Paige was upstairs getting ready for school, completely unaware that her world was about to crumble because of what I'd done at the Sunrise Medical Supplies office party. "You can't be serious," I whispered, my voice hoarse from the previous night's festivities. The papers felt heavy in my hands, each word a nail in the coffin of our 8-year marriage. Eddie's dark eyes were cold, distant in a way I'd never seen before. "Dead serious, Eulalie. I've already spoken to a lawyer." 3 days earlier, the Sunrise Medical Supplies office had been transformed for our annual holiday party. Twinkling lights hung from the ceiling tiles, and someone had pushed all the desks against the walls to create a makeshift dance floor. The smell of catered Mexican food mixed with the sharp scent of cheap champagne as my coworkers laughed and chatted around me. I stood near the refreshment table, nursing my 3rd glass of wine and feeling more relaxed than I had in months. At 32, I'd been working as an office administrator for the medical supply company for almost 4 years, and this was the first time I'd really let loose at a work function. "Eulalie, you look amazing tonight," Felix Tran said, sliding up beside me with that charming smile that had been making my heart flutter for weeks. At 28, he was younger than me, with perfectly styled black hair and an easy confidence that my husband Eddie had never possessed. "Thanks, Felix. You clean up pretty well yourself." I giggled, feeling the wine warming my cheeks. He was wearing a fitted black button-down that showed off his gym-toned physique, such a contrast to Eddie's perpetually rumpled teacher clothes. My phone buzzed with a text from Eddie. "Hey babe, how's the work thing going? Paige is asking when you'll be home. Told her you'd probably be back by 8. I glanced at the time, 8:47 p.m. The party was just getting started, and I was finally having fun for the first time in weeks. Eddie had been so distant lately, always grading papers or preparing lesson plans for his middle school classes. When was the last time he'd looked at me the way Felix was looking at me right now? I quickly typed back, "Still working. Might be late. Don't wait up." It wasn't technically a lie. This was a work function after all. "Everything okay?" Felix asked, moving closer. I caught a whiff of his expensive cologne, something woody and masculine that made my pulse quicken. "Just my husband checking in," I said, rolling my eyes. "He worries too much." "Lucky guy, having someone like you to worry about," Felix said, his voice dropping to that low, intimate tone that made me feel like the most interesting woman in the room. The DJ, actually just Marcus from accounting with his Spotify playlist, switched to something with a heavy beat that got people moving. I watched as my coworkers paired off and started dancing, their inhibitions loosened by alcohol and the festive atmosphere. "Come on, Eulalie," called out Janet from HR, waving me over to where she was dancing with a group of women from the billing department. "Stop being a wallflower." Felix grinned and held out his hand. "What do you say? One dance?" I hesitated for a moment, thinking about Eddie at home, helping Paige with her homework, probably wondering when I'd be back. Then I looked at Felix's outstretched hand and felt a thrill of rebellion surge through me. "Why not?" I said, taking his hand and letting him lead me onto the improvised dance floor. The music was loud and infectious, and I found myself moving to the rhythm with an abandon I hadn't felt in years. Felix was a good dancer, his hands respectfully placed on my waist as we swayed to the beat. Other couples danced around us, and I felt part of something exciting and spontaneous. "You're a natural," Felix said, spinning me around. I laughed, feeling dizzy from the wine and the movement. "I used to dance all the time in college," I called back over the music, "before I got married and settled down." "Well, you haven't lost it," he said, pulling me closer. His hand slipped lower on my back, and I should have stepped away, but the wine and the attention made me feel reckless. Someone, I think it was Derek from sales, started chanting, Go Eulalie! Go Eulalie! And suddenly all eyes were on us. Instead of feeling embarrassed, I felt energized by the attention. When was the last time anyone had looked at me like I was exciting, like I was worth watching? Get up there, shouted Linda from customer service, pointing at one of the sturdy conference tables that had been pushed against the wall. Show us what you've got. The crowd started cheering, and before I could think it through, I was climbing onto the table in my little black dress and heels. The wine had made everything feel dreamlike and consequence-free. Up there, with everyone watching and cheering, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years of suburban domesticity. I started dancing on the table, my movements getting bolder as the crowd egged me on. Felix stood below me, his eyes locked on mine, and I felt a rush of power and desire that I'd forgotten existed. You're incredible, he called up to me, and I believed him. That's when he reached up and put his hands on my waist, ostensibly to help steady me, but his touch lingered longer than necessary. His thumbs traced small circles on my hips through the thin fabric of my dress, and I didn't pull away. This is going on Instagram, someone shouted, and I saw phones being held up, cameras flashing. In my wine-soaked state, it felt like being a celebrity, like being someone worth documenting. I posed playfully, one hand on my hip, the other running through my hair. Felix's hands were still on my waist, and when I looked down at him, the desire in his eyes was unmistakable. Send it to everyone, Derek yelled, already typing on his phone. That should have been my wake-up call. That should have been the moment I climbed down, smoothed my dress, and called it a night. Instead, I laughed and kept dancing, Felix's hands growing bolder, sliding around to my lower back as he helped me down from the table. Want to get some air? He asked, his breath warm against my ear. I nodded, letting him guide me toward the back exit that led to the parking lot. My phone was buzzing insistently in my purse, but I ignored it. Outside, in the cool December air, Felix and I stood close together, the music from inside muffled but still audible. He had his jacket draped over my shoulders, and his arm around my waist felt natural, comfortable. I've been wanting to do this for weeks, he said, and before I could respond, he was kissing me. I should have pushed him away. I should have thought about Eddie, about Paige, about the life I'd built over the past 8 years. Instead, I kissed him back, my hands fisting in his shirt as months of feeling ignored and underappreciated by my husband melted away under Felix's attention. When we broke apart, I was breathless and flushed. Felix, I know you're married, he said quickly. I'm not asking you to leave him or anything crazy like that. But there's something between us, Eulalie. You feel it too, right? I did feel it. I felt desired and interesting and alive in a way I hadn't in years. I should go, I said, but I made no move to leave his arms. Should and want are 2 different things, he said, and kissed me again. By the time I finally made it home, it was past midnight. I'd spent another hour at the party, dancing and laughing, and soaking up attention from Felix and my coworkers. My phone had 17 missed calls from Eddie. The kitchen light was on when I stumbled through the front door, my heels clicking loudly on the hardwood floor. Eddie was sitting at our small dining table, still fully dressed despite the late hour. His laptop was open in front of him, and his phone lay beside it, the screen lit up with notifications. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual as I dropped my purse on the counter. You didn't have to wait up. Eddie looked up at me, and I could see the hurt and anger in his dark eyes. His usually neat brown hair was disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. Didn't I? He said quietly. It's 12:30, Eulalie. Your work party ended at 10. I kicked off my heels and tried to think of a reasonable explanation. The wine was still making everything feel slightly unreal, like this was happening to someone else. We went to Murphy's bar afterward, I said, which was true. A group of us had gone for one more drink after the office party. What I didn't mention was that Felix and I had spent most of that time in a corner booth, his hand on my thigh, as we talked and laughed. Murphy's bar. Eddie repeated flatly. For 2.5 hours. Time flies when you're having fun, I said, immediately regretting the flippant tone. Eddie's expression darkened. Fun, he said, turning his laptop screen toward me. Is this what you call fun? My stomach dropped. On the screen was a video, shaky phone footage of me dancing on the conference table at the office party. Even through the poor quality, you could clearly see Felix's hands on my waist, could see the way I was moving, the way I was looking at him. Eddie, it's not what it looks like. It looks like my wife getting felt up by some guy while dancing on a table at her office party, he said, his voice getting louder. It looks like you lying to me about working late while you were actually making out with your coworker in a parking lot. My blood ran cold. How did you... Janet from your HR department is married to my colleague Mike Peterson. He showed me the video an hour ago. Very thoughtful of him, don't you think? I felt the room spinning slightly, and it wasn't just from the wine. Eddie, please, let me explain. Explain what? Explain why you lied to me. Explain why you're letting another man put his hands all over you. Explain why half the town has now seen a video of my wife acting like she's single. His voice cracked on the last word, and I realized he wasn't just angry. He was devastated. It was just dancing, I said weakly. It didn't mean anything. Bullshit. The curse word sounded strange coming from Eddie, who rarely swore. I saw the way you were looking at him, Eulalie. I saw the way he was touching you. And according to Mike, there are photos of you two all over social media. He clicked through to Facebook, where I could see several photos from the party had already been posted. There I was, laughing and dancing with Felix, his arms around me in ways that definitely didn't look platonic. You're overreacting, I said, desperation creeping into my voice. It was just a party. I was just having fun. God knows I don't get much of that around here. Eddie stared at me for a long moment. So this is my fault? I didn't say that. You just said you don't have fun around here. With me, with our daughter. That's not what I meant. But even as I said it, I knew it was exactly what I meant. When was the last time Eddie had made me feel the way Felix had tonight? When was the last time he'd looked at me with desire instead of distracted affection? Then what did you mean, Eulalie? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been having an affair with your coworker and lying to me about it. It's not an affair, I protested. We kissed once. Tonight. That's all. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. Eddie's face went completely white. You kissed him. Eddie, you kissed another man. It didn't mean anything. Get out! The shout was so loud and unexpected that I stumbled backward. Upstairs, I heard Paige's bedroom door creak open. Mommy, came her small, scared voice from the top of the stairs. Daddy, why are you yelling? Eddie and I both froze, staring at each other across the kitchen. The weight of what we'd just exposed our daughter to hit me like a physical blow. It's okay, sweetheart, Eddie called up, his voice immediately gentle. Mommy and Daddy are just talking. Go back to bed. But you sounded mad, Paige said, and I could hear the tears in her voice. I started toward the stairs, but Eddie held up a hand to stop me. I'll handle it, he said coldly. You've done enough for one night. He went upstairs, and I heard him talking quietly to Paige, his voice soothing and patient in a way it hadn't been with me. I sank into one of the kitchen chairs, my head in my hands. My phone buzzed with a text from Felix. Had an amazing time tonight. Can't wait to see you Monday. I quickly deleted it, but not before noticing I had several other messages. From my sister Sandra, from Eddie's mother Janice, from coworkers who had seen the photos and videos. When Eddie came back downstairs 20 minutes later, his face was set in hard lines. She's scared, he said quietly. She heard us fighting and she's scared. She asked me if we're getting divorced. The word hit me like a slap. What did you tell her? I told her that sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, but we both love her very much. His voice was flat, emotionless. I didn't tell her that her mother is cheating on me. I'm not cheating. Don't. He held up a hand. Don't lie to me anymore, Eulalie. I can't take it. He picked up his phone and headed for the stairs. Where are you going? To sleep in the guest room. I can't even look at you right now. Eddie, please, can't we talk about this? He paused at the bottom of the stairs, his back to me. What's his name? What? The guy you kissed. What's his name? I hesitated. Felix. Felix Tran. Eddie nodded slowly. Felix Tran. Good to know. The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. There was something final about it, something that scared me more than his anger had. Eddie, but he was already gone, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. A few minutes later, I heard the guest room door close with a quiet click that somehow sounded louder than if he'd slammed it. I sat alone in the kitchen until nearly 2 a.m, staring at my phone as more and more notifications popped up. The video and photos were spreading faster than I could keep track of, shared and reshared by people I barely knew. By the time I finally went to bed, I had 43 missed calls and over 100 text messages. The last one was from my mother-in-law, Janice. We need to talk. I woke up Friday morning with a pounding headache and a sense of dread that had nothing to do with my hangover. Eddie had already left for work. I could hear his car pulling out of the driveway as I stumbled to the bathroom. Paige was unusually quiet during breakfast, picking at her cereal while shooting worried glances in my direction. Is Daddy mad at you? She asked finally, her 7-year-old directness cutting through my foggy thoughts. Daddy and I just had a disagreement, sweetheart, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Sometimes grown-ups argue, but it doesn't mean we don't love each other. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. The look in Eddie's eyes last night had been unlike anything I'd ever seen from him. It wasn't just anger. It was disappointment, betrayal, and something that looked disturbingly like disgust. After dropping Paige off at school, I sat in my car in the Sunrise Medical Supplies parking lot for 10 minutes, trying to work up the courage to go inside. My phone had been buzzing constantly since I woke up, but I'd been too afraid to look at the messages. Finally, I forced myself to check. My sister Sandra had texted, "Saw the video, call me ASAP." Janice had sent a longer message. "Eulalie, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this behavior is unacceptable. Eddie is devastated. We need to discuss this as a family." There were dozens of others, some supportive, some judgmental, some just curious. But it was the message from my boss, Patricia Williams, that made my stomach clench. "Please see me first thing this morning. We need to discuss last night's events." I walked into the office with as much dignity as I could muster, but I could feel eyes on me from the moment I stepped through the door. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as I passed, and I caught people quickly looking away from their computer screens. "Morning, Eulalie," said Janet from HR, but her usual warm smile was replaced by a look of professional concern. "Morning," I replied, trying to sound normal. Felix wasn't at his desk yet, which was probably for the best. I wasn't sure how I was supposed to act around him after last night, especially with everyone watching. Patricia's office door was open, and she waved me in as soon as she saw me. "Close the door, please," she said, and I knew this wasn't going to be a casual chat. Patricia was in her 50s, a no-nonsense woman who had built Sunrise Medical Supplies from a small family business into a regional success story. She'd always been fair with me, but she didn't tolerate drama or unprofessional behavior. "I assume you know why you're here," she said, gesturing for me to sit down. "The party last night," I said, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. "The party, yes. Specifically, your behavior at the party." She pulled up something on her computer screen and turned it toward me. It was the video of me dancing on the table, Felix's hands clearly visible on my waist. "Patricia, I know how it looks, but it looks like one of my employees was engaging in inappropriate behavior with a coworker at a company-sponsored event," she said crisply. "It looks like that behavior was recorded and is now circulating on social media with our company name attached to it." My cheeks burned with embarrassment. It was just dancing. Maybe I had a little too much wine, but… Oulali, I've received 3 calls this morning from clients who saw the video. 3. Our reputation is built on professionalism and trustworthiness, and this… She gestured at the screen. This doesn't project that image. I understand your concern, but surely this is being blown out of proportion. Is it? Patricia leaned back in her chair. Because from what I understand, this involved you and Felix Tran, who is married, by the way. Did you know that? My stomach dropped. Married? For 6 months. His wife is pregnant with their first child. Patricia's expression was stern. She called me this morning, Oulali. She was crying. The room seemed to tilt around me. Felix was married. Not only married, but his wife was pregnant, and she'd seen the video of her husband with his hands all over me. I didn't know, I whispered. That doesn't make it better, Patricia said. If anything, it makes it worse. It suggests you don't know your coworkers well enough to be engaging in this kind of behavior with them. I felt tears prick at my eyes. What happens now? Patricia sighed. You're a good employee, Oulali. You've been with us for 4 years, and your work has always been satisfactory. But this is a serious lapse in judgment that reflects poorly on the company. Are you firing me? I'm putting you on probation, any further incidents of unprofessional behavior, and we'll have to discuss termination. Additionally, I'm requiring you to attend the company's harassment and workplace conduct seminar. The humiliation was complete. I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain steady. I also think it would be best if you and Felix maintained a strictly professional relationship going forward. No more personal interactions. Of course, I managed. When I left Patricia's office, I felt like everyone in the building was staring at me. I made it to the break room before the tears started falling. Rough morning? I turned to see Derek from sales, the same Derek who had been cheering me on last night. But there was no friendliness in his expression now, just a kind of smug satisfaction. I'm fine, I said, wiping my eyes. Heard you had a meeting with Patricia. That's never good. He poured himself a cup of coffee, taking his time. Funny how things look different in the light of day, isn't it? What's that supposed to mean? Just that what seemed like harmless fun last night has caused a lot of problems today. Felix's wife showed up here an hour ago, crying and pregnant, and asking to see the woman who was all over her husband. My blood ran cold. She came here. Oh yeah, Patricia had to call security to escort her out. She was pretty upset. Derek's tone was conversational, but there was malice underneath it. Can't say I blame her, really. If my wife was dancing on tables and making out with coworkers, I'd be pretty upset too. I wasn't making out with anyone. That's not what the video shows, Derek said with a shrug. But hey, what do I know? I'm just saying, maybe next time think about the consequences before you decide to get wild at a work party. He left me standing alone in the break room, shaking with anger and humiliation. The rest of the day was a nightmare. Felix avoided me completely, not even making eye contact when we passed in the hallway. My other coworkers were polite but distant, and I caught several people whispering and looking in my direction. At lunch, I tried to join my usual group at their table in the break room, but the conversation died as soon as I sat down. So, said Linda from customer service, how's Eddie handling everything? The question was loaded, and everyone at the table knew it. He's fine, I lied. It was just a party. People are making way too big a deal out of this. Really? Linda raised an eyebrow. Because my husband heard from Mike Peterson that Eddie was pretty upset last night. I felt trapped, surrounded by people who had been my friends just 24 hours ago, and were now treating me like a pariah. Eddie is just… He's insecure, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. He's always been jealous and controlling. He can't stand the idea of me having fun without him. The table went silent. I realized I'd just thrown my husband under the bus to a group of people who barely knew him, and it made me look even worse. Insecure, repeated Janet from HR. That's an interesting way to describe a man whose wife was publicly flirting with another man. I wasn't flirting. Honey, Linda said, not unkindly. We were all there. We all saw what happened. Maybe instead of blaming Eddie, you should think about why he might be upset. I left the break room feeling more isolated than ever. These people had encouraged me last night, had cheered me on, and taken photos and videos. Now they were acting like I was some kind of pariah, like I'd done something unforgivable. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Family dinner, Murphy's Diner, 6 p.m. It was from Eddie, and the formal tone of it made my stomach clench. I had a feeling this wasn't going to be a casual family meal. Murphy's Diner was busy for a Friday evening, filled with families and couples enjoying their weekend dinner out. Under normal circumstances, it would have been a pleasant place for a family meal. But as I walked in and saw Eddie sitting in a corner booth with Paige, his mother Janice, and his brother Dean, I knew this was going to be anything but pleasant. Eddie had changed out of his work clothes into a button-down shirt and khakis, but he looked tired and older than his 35 years. Paige was coloring on the kids' menu, her dark hair falling across her face as she concentrated on staying within the lines. Janice looked up as I approached, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. At 60, she was still an attractive woman, but her expression could have frozen water. Dean, Eddie's older brother by 3 years, didn't even acknowledge my arrival. "Sorry I'm late," I said, sliding into the booth next to Paige. Traffic was terrible. "Mommy." Paige brightened immediately, showing me her coloring. "Look, I made the princess purple." "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I said, kissing the top of her head. At least one person at this table was still happy to see me. "We ordered for you," Eddie said quietly. "Grilled chicken salad, dressing on the side." It was my usual order. The fact that he remembered it after everything that had happened made my chest tighten with guilt. "Thank you," I said. Janice cleared her throat. "Eulalie, I think we need to discuss what happened last night." I glanced at Paige, who was still coloring but obviously listening. "Maybe we should wait until when?" Janice's voice was sharp. "Until after you've completely destroyed this family?" "Mom," Eddie said quietly, "keep your voice down." "Don't tell me to keep my voice down, Eddie. Someone needs to say what everyone's thinking." She turned to me, her grey eyes flashing with anger. "I've seen the video, Eulalie. We all have. Half the town has seen it by now." "It was just a party," I said weakly. "Just a party." Dean spoke up for the first time, his voice incredulous. "You were dancing on a table while another man had his hands all over you. That's not just a party. That's public humiliation for your husband." "Dean," Eddie started. "No, Eddie, someone needs to say it. You're too nice. You always have been. But this," he gestured vaguely in my direction, "this is unacceptable." I felt my cheeks burning with embarrassment and anger. "I don't think this is appropriate to discuss in front of Paige." "You should have thought about Paige before you decided to make a spectacle of yourself," Janice snapped. "What's a spectacle?" Paige asked, looking up from her coloring. The table went silent. Eddie reached over and smoothed her hair. "Nothing, baby. Just grown-up talk." Our food arrived, providing a temporary reprieve from the tension. But I could feel Janice's disapproving stare boring into me as I picked at my salad. "I talked to Sandra today," Janice said after a few minutes. "She's very concerned about you." My sister Sandra had been trying to reach me all day, but I'd been too ashamed to call her back. "Sandra doesn't understand the situation," I said. "What situation is that?" Dean asked. "The situation where you're cheating on your husband." "I'm not cheating." The words came out louder than I intended, and several people at nearby tables turned to look. Paige's eyes widened with alarm. "Keep your voice down," Eddie said firmly. "I'm not cheating," I repeated more quietly. "I kissed someone once. Once. It was a mistake and it didn't mean anything." "It meant something to his pregnant wife," Janice said coldly. My stomach dropped. I'd been trying not to think about Felix's wife, about the woman who was carrying his child while he was putting his hands on me. I didn't know he was married, I said. That makes it worse, not better, Dean said. It means you don't even know the man you're throwing your marriage away for. I'm not throwing my marriage away. Aren't you? Janice leaned forward. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're doing everything you can to destroy what you and Eddie have built together. I looked at Eddie, hoping for some support, some sign that he didn't agree with his family's harsh assessment. But he was focused on cutting Paige's chicken into small pieces, his face carefully neutral. Eddie has been nothing but good to you, Janice continued. He's a wonderful husband and father. He works hard. He's faithful and kind and patient. And this is how you repay him? You don't know what our marriage is like, I said, desperation creeping into my voice. You don't know what it's like to feel invisible, to feel like your husband sees you as just another obligation to check off his list. Eddie's hand stilled on Paige's plate. That's not fair, Eulalie, he said quietly. Isn't it? When was the last time you looked at me, really looked at me, the way you used to? When was the last time we talked about something other than Paige's schedule, or the mortgage payment, or what we're having for dinner? So you decided to get attention from someone else's husband? Dean's voice was incredulous. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Janice demanded. Because from the video, it looked exactly like that. I felt tears starting to form and blinked them back. I would not cry in front of these people, not when they were already treating me like a criminal. You wouldn't understand, I said. Try me, Janice said. I looked around the table, at Janice's disapproving face, at Dean's barely concealed disgust, at Eddie's careful neutrality, at Paige's confused expression. I felt alive, I said finally. For the first time in years, I felt like someone saw me as more than just a wife and mother and employee. I felt attractive and interesting and desired. The words hung in the air between us. And that was worth humiliating your husband, Dean asked. I didn't mean to humiliate anyone. But you did, Janice said. You humiliated Eddie. You humiliated yourself. And you humiliated our entire family. I made a mistake, I said, my voice breaking slightly. One mistake. Doesn't that count for something? Don't the last 8 years count for anything? Eddie finally looked up at me, and the pain in his eyes made my chest ache. Of course they count, he said quietly. But Eulalie, this isn't just about one night. This is about trust. This is about respect. This is about the fact that when things got difficult in our marriage, instead of talking to me about it, you turned to someone else. I tried to talk to you. When? When did you try to talk to me about feeling invisible or unappreciated? I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it again. Because the truth was, I hadn't tried. I'd let my resentment build up over months and years, and instead of addressing it with Eddie, I'd let Felix's attention fill the void. That's what I thought, Eddie said sadly. Paige, who had been quietly listening to this exchange, suddenly spoke up. Are you and Mommy getting divorced? The question hit the table like a bomb. Eddie and I both turned to her, her little face scrunched up with worry. Sweetheart, I started. Tommy's parents got divorced, she continued, her voice small. He said they used to fight all the time, and then his daddy moved to a different house. Eddie reached over and took her hand. Paige, honey, sometimes grown-ups have problems they need to work out. But no matter what happens, Mommy and I both love you very much, and that will never change. It was a careful, diplomatic answer, but it wasn't a denial. My heart started racing. I want to go home, Paige said, tears starting to form in her eyes. Of course, baby, Eddie said, signaling the waitress for the check. We can go home. As we gathered our things to leave, Janice leaned over to me. I hope you're proud of yourself, she said quietly, so Paige couldn't hear. Look what you've done to that little girl. I looked at Paige, who was clinging to Eddie's hand with a worried expression that no 7-year-old should have to wear. I never wanted to hurt her, I whispered. But you did, Janice said. You hurt all of us. As we walked out of the diner, Eddie carrying a sleepy Paige while Dean and Janice headed to their own cars, I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. "Eddie," I said as we reached our car. He turned to me, and I saw him slip a manila folder from his jacket into his briefcase. "What's that?" I asked. "Nothing you need to worry about tonight," he said. "Let's just get Paige home and to bed." But the way he said it, the careful way he avoided my eyes, sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the December cold. Saturday morning arrived grey and cold, matching my mood perfectly. Eddie had already left the house by the time I woke up. His note on the kitchen counter said he'd taken Paige to his mother's house for the day. The silence in the house felt oppressive, broken only by the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I spent the morning cleaning obsessively, trying to keep my hands busy and my mind off the disaster my life had become in just 48 hours. But every time I passed the computer, I was tempted to check social media, to see how far the video had spread. Finally, I gave in to the temptation. The video had been shared over 300 times on Facebook alone. The comments ranged from supportive, "Everyone makes mistakes," to cruel, "What a slut, her poor husband." Someone had even created a meme using a screenshot of me on the table, with the caption, "When you're married but forgot to tell your coworkers." I slammed the laptop shut, feeling sick. My phone rang, Sandra's name on the screen. "Finally," she said when I answered. "I've been trying to reach you for 2 days. I know, I'm sorry. Things have been complicated." "Complicated?" Sandra's voice was sharp. "Eulalie, I saw the video. Half of Facebook has seen the video. What were you thinking?" I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. "I wasn't thinking. I was having fun." "Fun?" Sandra sighed heavily. "Honey, I love you, but this wasn't fun. This was self-destructive. And now it's all over the internet with your name attached to it." "I know." "Do you? Because from what I'm hearing, you're blaming Eddie for being upset instead of taking responsibility for what you did." I felt a flash of anger. "Who told you that?" "Does it matter? The point is, you screwed up, Eulalie. Badly. And instead of owning it and trying to fix things, you're making excuses." "I'm not making excuses. You told people at work that Eddie is controlling and jealous. You told his family that he makes you feel invisible. Those are excuses, honey. Those are ways of shifting blame instead of accepting responsibility." I was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the grey December sky. "I don't know how to fix this," I said finally. "Start by apologizing. Really apologizing. Not just saying sorry, but actually acknowledging what you did wrong and how it hurt people." "I have apologized." "Have you? Or have you just said you're sorry while also explaining why you did it?" I thought about my conversations with Eddie over the past 2 days and realized Sandra was right. Every apology had come with a justification. Every expression of regret had been followed by an explanation of why I'd felt driven to act the way I did. "I don't think he'll forgive me," I whispered. "Maybe not," Sandra said gently. "But you owe it to him and to Paige to try. Really try, without excuses or blame." After we hung up, I sat on the couch for a long time, thinking about what Sandra had said. She was right. I had been making excuses, shifting blame, trying to make my behavior Eddie's fault, instead of taking full responsibility. When Eddie and Paige came home that evening, I was ready with dinner, and what I hoped was a genuine apology. But the moment they walked through the door, I could see that something had changed. Eddie's face was set in hard lines, and he was carrying a manila folder that looked suspiciously like the one I'd seen him with at the diner. "How was Grandma's?" I asked Paige, trying to keep my voice light. "Good," she said, but she seemed subdued. "She made cookies." "That sounds fun. Why don't you go wash your hands for dinner?" After Paige disappeared upstairs, I turned to Eddie. "We need to talk," I said. "Yes," he agreed. "We do." He sat down at the kitchen table and opened the folder. Inside were printed screenshots of Facebook posts, photos from the party, and what looked like phone records. "What is all this?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. "Evidence," Eddie said quietly. "Evidence of your affair with Felix Tran." "It's not an affair. These are text messages between you and Felix going back 6 weeks," Eddie said, pulling out several pages of printed texts. "Messages where you complain about me, where you flirt with him, where you make plans to meet him." My stomach dropped as I saw my own words printed out in black and white. Messages I'd thought were harmless flirtations suddenly looked damning when taken out of context. "Eddie, those don't mean anything. My husband doesn't understand me like you do," he read aloud. "I wish I could spend more time with you. Eddie's working late again. Want to grab a drink?" Each message felt like a physical blow. Seeing them printed out, organized chronologically, made it clear that this hadn't been a single moment of poor judgment. It had been a pattern of behavior over weeks. "This one's from 3 days ago," Eddie continued. "Can't wait for the party tomorrow night. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk privately." And his response, "I've been thinking about you all week. Eddie, please." And then there are the financial records. He pulled out bank statements with several charges highlighted in yellow. Murphy's Bar, November 15th, $47. Starbucks, November 22nd, $18. Olive Garden, December 3rd, $73. All charges that happened when you told me you were working late or running errands. I felt the walls closing in around me. "How did you get these?" "I have access to our joint accounts, Eulalie. I've had access for 8 years. I just never had reason to look before." The methodical way he'd gathered all this evidence scared me more than his anger had. This wasn't the impulsive reaction of a hurt husband. This was the careful preparation of a man who was planning something. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I want the truth. All of it. No more lies, no more excuses, no more blaming me for your choices." I looked at the evidence spread out on the table, months of my life reduced to printed pages that told a story I didn't want to acknowledge. "You're right," I said finally. "It wasn't just one kiss. We've been flirting for weeks, meeting for coffee, for drinks. I was attracted to him, and I liked the attention." Eddie nodded slowly. And I was unhappy in our marriage. I felt like you didn't see me anymore, like I was just part of the furniture. Felix made me feel interesting and desirable and alive. "So you started an emotional affair." The words hung in the air between us. An emotional affair. That's what it had been, even if I hadn't wanted to admit it to myself. "Yes," I whispered, "and at the party it became physical. We kissed, that's all." "That's all?" Eddie's voice was incredulous. "Eulalie, you were dancing on a table while he had his hands all over you, in front of our friends and neighbors, in front of people I work with. I know it was wrong. I know I humiliated you, and I'm sorry." "Are you? Are you really sorry, or are you just sorry you got caught?" The question stopped me cold. Was I sorry for what I'd done, or just sorry for the consequences? "I'm sorry I hurt you," I said finally. "I'm sorry I hurt Paige. I'm sorry I damaged our marriage and our family." Eddie stared at me for a long moment. "But are you sorry you did it?" I opened my mouth to say yes. Of course I was sorry, but the words wouldn't come. Because the truth was, for those few hours at the party, I had felt more alive and desired than I had in years. And as much as I regretted the consequences, I couldn't honestly say I regretted the feeling itself. My silence was answer enough. Eddie closed the folder and stood up. "I spoke to a lawyer today," he said quietly. The words hit me like a physical blow. "Eddie, no, I can't do this anymore, Eulalie. I can't be married to someone who thinks so little of our relationship that she'll throw it away for attention from a coworker. It doesn't have to be over—" "Yes, it does." He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table. "These are divorce papers. I'm filing on Monday." I stared at the envelope, unable to process what I was seeing. This was really happening. My marriage was really over. "What about Paige?" I whispered. "What about her? You should have thought about Paige before you decided to have an affair." "I'll fight you," I said, desperation making my voice shrill. "I'll fight for custody. She's my daughter too." Eddie's expression didn't change. "With what lawyer? With what money?" "You make $30,000 a year as an office administrator, Eulalie. I make 65 as a teacher, plus I have tenure and benefits. I can provide stability for Paige in a way you can't." "You can't take my daughter away from me." "I'm not taking her away, but I am going to make sure she has a stable home environment, which clearly isn't something I can count on with you." The cold, methodical way he was discussing our daughter's future terrified me more than anything else that had happened. "Eddie, please. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. It's too late for that." He headed toward the stairs, then paused. "I'll be sleeping in the guest room until I can find an apartment. I think it's best if we don't discuss this in front of Paige until after I file the papers." "Eddie." But he was already gone, leaving me alone with the divorce papers and the wreckage of my marriage. In the dim law office, Eddie's lawyer, Robert Henderson, laid out the divorce papers and custody petition with clinical precision. Primary custody to Eddie. Supervised visitation for me, 2 hours every other Saturday. Due to adultery, documented texts, photos, videos from the office party, and 6 weeks of lies funded by marital money. "It wasn't just one mistake," Henderson said. "It was a pattern of deception and poor judgment that harmed Paige." Eddie's eyes held only pain. "She needs a mother who chooses family first. You chose Felix." I signed with shaking hands, agreeing to lose my daughter's daily life for months of supervised visits and court-ordered counseling. Felix texted once more. I deleted it. He vanished. Eddie remarried, built a stable home. Paige grew distant, polite, but guarded. I'd traded everything real, marriage, family, my child's trust, for fleeting excitement. Nothing was worth it.